Good morning. Woo! Is that too loud? Is that okay? Okay. Excuse me. I'm very glad to be having a good hair day today since we have a professional photographer in the room. Hi. My name's Chris Hess. I'm a content strategist here at Healthwise. You sure this is not too loud? It sounds really loud to me. Okay, good. I am really excited to be part of this World IA Day. This is my first. Really looking forward to it. Happy World IA Day, if that's a thing that you say. I want to start this day off talking about language. I want to talk about language in the context of structure, about how in a digital information environment, language expressed via text or images or video or anything that conveys meaning to humans is dependent on and can spring from information architecture. A recent article by the president of the IAI, which I didn't know that, Abby Covert, really made clear to me the connection between information architecture and content strategy. IA is about systems that describe structure and language. Content strategy contributes to that system, those systems, and builds on them in order to get at content that is useful and usable to the humans at the other ends of these interactions. Content strategy's perhaps less exciting day job is about finding the sweet spot between user needs and business goals. Our mission here at Healthwise is to help people make better health decisions. So our users need accurate, consistent, helpful health and wellness content. For Healthwise, where we have tens of thousands of pages of heavily reviewed, regularly updated health and wellness content covering much of the world of medicine, which is a really big world, our business requires modular, reusable content. So that intersection between user needs, business goals, for us, leads to structured content. So what do we mean by structured content? This is, in content strategy worlds, this is something that is just like, it peppers speech like commas and punctuation. It's just everywhere. It's kind of a given. What do we mean by structured content here at Healthwise? Basically this, it's content that's authored around more granular concepts or tasks. Chunks of content or topics, as we'll be calling them, are clearly defined and identifiable. Chunks vary in size, and they're not locked into any single presentation or output or display. They can also be assembled in many ways, depending on the user need or the user context to get at the modular part of it. Put more simply, per Karen McGrain, who is an information architect, it's this. It's multiple sizes, meaningful metadata, written for reuse. This is our mantra here at Healthwise for the past little while, becoming a long while. But structured content has to be these things. It has to be modular, it has to be flexible, it has to be consistent and predictable. You have to know what you're going to get. You have to know what you can do with a given thing without having to read every word in the thing. It really shouldn't be this thing. Health information is a living, breathing body of knowledge. Development and review and update literally never end here at Healthwise. It's built into the content that we work on. It's easy to imagine with so many things in play at any moment, and considering that we can't just do everything at once, we can't flip a switch and go from here to here, it's a long migration, things can drift. Use of structures can float away from their original intent. Meaning can morph over time. So we need to account for predictable content structures consistently used. And since our goal, as I said, is to help people make better health decisions, reach a deeper understanding of a very serious concept that's affecting their lives in very serious ways, make a change in the behavior, which is just amazingly, crushingly hard, or make a difficult but informed health decision, we have to not only be accurate, but we have to be very clear. And those are not necessarily the same thing, but we have to be both. So we need rules about the structure of our content, and we need rules about the substance of our content, the meaning that comes from the language. First, let's talk about structure. The rules of structure for us are embodied in a content model and the code behind the content objects created from that model. We arrived at our new content model, the model that we're moving toward, the way everyone should, through much analysis, thank you, Carl, tedious review, many arguments, making judgment calls, weighing one thing against another, and just getting to a decision that we could live with for now, again and again and again and again. And eventually you cover all your bases for the moment. We came to a set that looks sensible and familiar to us, and this was our first iteration at the new content model. So what is a content model in this context? A lot of people in this room are probably very familiar with data modeling, and content modeling is sort of an extension of that in the content world, content strategy world. It's a documentation of all the different types of content you will have for a given site or project. It includes working definitions of each content type's elements, the relationship of those elements to each other, of those types to each other. You can build out, to represent your model, a simple org chart style diagram, which is what you see a lot of. You can also get way more complex with Excel or with other systems that you can use to represent this content model. The detail always should depend on the purpose you need the model to serve. So this is a snapshot of the content types included in the Healthwise content model so far. Each of these has a specific houses a specific type of content, which is content with a specific job to do. It's the way we like to think about it. And just, you can see we've got basic educational content at the top, info concept. This is like the majority of our stuff lives in this sort of a structure. We've also got task structures for instructional content. We've got content structures to house references to media objects, be they video or static images. We've got a structure specific to the personal story. That format is one that we use a lot and has unique needs and unique output that we expect from it, so it has its own type. So you can see we analyzed our content, we got to the things that we need, that we used the most, that made sense, minimized that list as much as we could without losing flexibility or functionality, and this is where we're starting. Actually, I guess like this is where we started. That was a while ago, so we've been iterating on this for a while and developing it as we're doing the work. Some of these types are pretty simple, at least in the beginning. This is an early mock-up via Balsamic, which is on that table somewhere, I think, of our video type. And video is not a simple thing to figure out, but the content type to house video is pretty simple, right? You've got a title. Well, this is a representation of the template. You have a title, you have a reference to a video that lives in the cloud. It's not here. And you've got a place for some teaser or caption text, and then there's some metadata attached to that thing. It's pretty simple, but it suits our needs for video. And sometimes our video needs aren't even this. We don't even need this thing. We just embed this video straight into a presentation or output, and the content object associated with it isn't even needed, but we have it when we need it. This is a more complex type. This is our task structure. And it is only as complex as it needs to be, and that's the rule always, ever. Only as complex as it has to be, right? Building and maintaining a content model is a constant tension, constant balance between complexity and usefulness. Only ever as much complexity as you need to get the usefulness of the thing that you're modeling. So the rules are built into these diagrams. This is what we're using to represent our content model here. This is called a spatial schema diagram. I got this, borrowed it, stole it, whatever, from a guy named Joe Pearman, who's big in the DITA community, which is the XML spec that we're moving toward for our structured content. And he said it was okay, so I didn't really steal it. But it's great. I love these things because there's a lot of information in here, and at first glance it looks complex, but it's really pretty visually explanatory. You've got what the element names are that you're working with. You've got requirement and optional for each element. You've got the number of things allowed or required. You've got hierarchy. You've got nesting. You've got the definition of specialized elements, which is another thing in DITA that I think Maria will dig into a little bit later on. So there's a lot of information in here, and just glancing at it, you can see the things you need to create the piece of content that you're about to create. And you know that anyone else making task content follows this same structure, follows these same rules, because this is the template that they use to make. This is actually a DTD that's behind the template that they use to make that content. So I like it because they're visual, they promote understanding at general levels and at very specific levels at the same time. And if you're creating task content for Healthwise, the rules of this are built into the actual templates that you'll use, which get enforced by humans via the review and editorial process and get enforced by machines through quality testing. This is that same thing. This is the template that we have for our task content in our online editor, our online CMS client. And you can see it's really simplified. This is where the content developer works. And what you've got is editorial guidance that lives right in the CMS or the CCMS, right in the templates that you're using to create it, with brief instructions on how to create each type, how to create each element. We include how to write our titles so that titles work from one type to another, that they are not necessarily the same thing, but when combined in a presentation, they work together. How to do leads, how to construct lists, how to separate outcome information from post-requisite information, how to get at really the value of the semantic tags inside the spec that we're using. And all of this is just to get to a standard means of creating this kind of content so that any of our pieces can stand alongside any of our other pieces. That's the modularity piece. And we also have a really in-depth style guide that has much more detail, and we'll see some of that later on. We know we need that. We need like the bulky rule set, but we also need really the minimal version of this at the point of creation so that you don't have to have reference material. You open a template and you know what to do because it's right there. So structures we have, okay. The rules behind them allow us to assemble different pieces and different types of content into many coherent wholes, all with the benefit, which is huge for us, of consistency and accuracy that you get from reused content, because you're reusing the same content in multiple places instead of copying this here and pasting it here, and then those two things go off on their own lives. You're referring to the same content. Let's see. So the benefits of consistency and accuracy, which I should say, that's really, I mean, that's do or die for us, that we have to be that. That's just how it works. All of these pieces are available to other compositions as well, right? So here you see different types assembled into what is patient instruction. This is a document, usually a printed document that a patient will get after a visit to the doctor. This guy comes in, this person, that's a guy, but not the person who will receive this, comes in because he has asthma and needs to learn how to use a metered dose inhaler. He goes home with this. This is his instructions. You can imagine that this picture of somebody using a metered dose inhaler would be useful in other places and more and greater information about how to manage your asthma, or in a smaller piece just about what does an inhaler look like. Maybe you wouldn't want that. But, and then there's information about what is a metered dose inhaler, when would you use it? There's instructions for how to prepare to use your inhaler, how to use the kind with the spacer, how to use the kind without a spacer. Every one of these pieces is available to other presentations. Every one of these pieces does different jobs. Sorry about the images. Sometimes it's hard to find things that aren't disturbing. This is pink eye. It's not that disturbing, but it's a little gross. But here again, we've got different types. This is another patient instruction. So you've gone to the doctor because maybe your child has pink eye. You can see what the pink eye looks like. You've got a definition of what is pink eye. And each of these topics is identified by its structure, its topic type. The top is what we call a STEM topic. The bottom is this informational content. On the next page of this, we've got some instructional content. We've got some actionable content, which is how do you take care of yourself at home? And this stuff, all of these bullets in here on how to care for yourself with pink eye are available to anywhere else we want to talk about pink eye. They're also available to other places where the same self-care might apply, like some other eye condition. If the steps you take to take care of yourself are the same, we can use that same content and prevent even more drift. Down here, we've got when to call a doctor about your pink eye, right? And this is a specific structure because we do the same thing. We use these bullets in many, many places. As you can imagine, like signs of shock or different sets of symptoms or signs that you have that you would want to call a doctor about could be applied in many places. So that's the rules of structure. I'm going to move on to substance now, unless there's any Any questions about anything I just said? Pretty clear. All right. The rules of substance is really where I wanted to head today. When it comes to substance, and by that I mean the meaning of the text or the visuals or the audio that's in the content. I mean the stuff that's in between the tags in the content. The requirements are really parallel. To give proper attention to editorial work, you need to shift focus away from structure a bit, but without losing sight of structure. And that's what I mean when I say talk about substance in the context of structure, right? It's a tricky thing not only to get, but to communicate. As Sarah Wachter-Becher says, it's about seeing structures through the lens of meaning and storytelling. It's about the meaning of what is between the tags. Lucky for us, meaning and storytelling are things that we do really well here. We've got a great editorial team, a great content development team. It's been working together for a long time, much mastery, great skills on this team. And we've used it and we've worked them over and moving from this existing content model to a new modular, reusable content model. For all our skills, for all our smarts and our desire to do the right thing, it's tough. It's really difficult to make a paradigm shift like this, which is what it really is. We had to rethink things, tear down our ideas of how to develop content in the same way that we had to tear down the structures of our content to get at what the new structures are. If you think about creating and maintaining modular small pieces of very targeted focused content as opposed to creating and maintaining what might be like a 40-page document that contains everything we know about asthma, that is essentially a narrative experience, these are very, very different things. It's not just smaller, it's refactoring, it's reworking, it's redirecting it toward the model and the rules of structure and substance. So we've been working in a space in between the documented spec we're working with, which is DITA. Does everyone know what DITA is here? When I say DITA, it's a spec of XML. Awesome. Is that a no? It's a XML spec that's based on reuse. You get some pretty basic content types. Maria's going to talk more about this later, and she'll make way better sense of it than I am. But it basically gets you topics and it gets you maps. So you can take these topics and combine them and recombine them in maps. That's way oversimplified, but that's basically what it is. It builds on top of XML to give you certain things that you can reuse. So we've been working in a space between that, this new world, and the style guide that we have had and built and cared for and maintained over years and years of content development work. And our goal is to accomplish at least the same standard of plain language and clarity that we have now, if not improve it. And really, it all comes back to the IA. For these pieces of content to work together and do their jobs, we need to know the dimensions of the substance of the pieces as well as the dimensions of the structure of the pieces. We need to represent meaning for these things in very specific ways. I think I said we've got tens of thousands of pages of content now, pages that we are busting up into tens and tens of thousands of tiny little pieces. So we've got to be able to represent the meaning of these things very specifically. We accomplish this via things we call concept and aspect. Or what is the concept or subject matter of the content, and what aspect or slice of that subject matter does this particular piece of content address? From these two things, we get broad categorization and we get specific categorization. For instance, these are good examples. For instance, here we've got a piece about, this is that same patient instruction on pink eye, and we've got the piece about how do you care for yourself for pink eye. We've got when to call pink eye, represented in RDF, which Carl Burnett will be talking about in much greater detail this afternoon. In the triple, which is how RDF is constructed. It works like this: UH3305, that topic at the top, is about how do you care for yourself with pink eye, right? UH3306 is about when to call a doctor for pink eye. You can kind of carry this out and see how many aspects we would have that you could apply to the same set of concepts, and you could see how that body of information can be refactored into many, many small pieces. Seems simple enough. It's not. It's tremendously complex, really rich, fascinating work, and the power behind it, as we're only starting to see, is really huge. All of this really is so that we can describe with the precision we need what this thing is about, right? What is between the tags in this thing, what this piece of content is about. Combination of semantic markup inside this content structure and the metadata that is attached to it means that we, the humans, and they, the machines, know a whole lot about this and every other piece of content that we have through the lens of structure as well as through the lens of substance. So the list of concepts that we work with is enormous and growing. Basically, it's medicine, it's health, and everything contained therein. More containable and more relevant to this discussion is aspects, where we get at the specifics of whatever concept is on the table at the time. Our aspects exist in groupings that make sense to the people creating the content. These are some of those categories. As you can see, when we're talking about health, you've got conditions, procedures, medical tests, you've got the wellness world. Pregnancy is its own thing. It doesn't really adhere to the other sets of aspects. Prevention, etc. This universal box is aspects that are available to any of these sets, like what is it? You can imagine how that would be useful in any of these arenas. There's a whole bunch of those. Here's one of those categories expanded. This is our set of test aspects. And you get the details of all of the possibilities behind what we talk about as medical tests. Each of these things is valuable on its own. The piece about how accurate is this, there we go. How accurate is this test? What happens next after the test? What do I tell my doctor before the test? How do I understand my results, right? These are all the little pieces that contribute to information about medical tests. And this is our standard for granularity, really. When you're going from the huge things to the small things, one of the biggest questions is how small do you go, right? And our guideline for that was usefulness, to the point of it being useful, right? Not only that it can stand alone as an aspect of a concept, but that it is a useful thing on its own. That's a lot of judgment calls. It's a lot of hypothesizing based on the way that we've always done things and what we know about the spec that we're moving toward. The need for this gets into how we expect health information to be consumed in the future, right? That world is changing. We're into electronic medical records. We're into third-party apps where your content has to work, and your Map My Fitness versus your Strava or someone else's health something. Our content needs to be able to get in there and work. We need to be able to do everything we do now, which is represent the body of knowledge and all of these other things as well. That's the future-ready part of the quote from Sarah Wachter-Becher. Behind every one of these aspects is a scope note. You knew you were going to see a spreadsheet at some point. These are living text accounts of what does or does not belong in an aspect space. This is hugely important for keeping a big content development team who do not all work in the same space on the same page, so that everybody understands an aspect in the same way as everybody else. For example, a scope note for course discusses the usual course of a condition. Only include atypical outcomes in the full detail, which is the big one in the multiple sizes model, right? Atypical outcomes don't belong in the tiny ones, just in the big one where you have space to get at that. Additionally, conditions with officially defined stages that are of concern to patients, stages with names that patients will know and have to deal with, go somewhere else. That goes in stages, because then we can separate those things from these things. The aspect set itself expands and contracts as we learn and move forward. We expect that always to be the case. As I said, this is a living, breathing body of knowledge. So that's one set of the rules on aspects. Here's another. This is the style guide. This is where a lot of the rich detail lives. Here we define concepts. We give some examples. You can see the scale that these things exist at. For meds, you've got antibiotics all the way down to warfarin. For procedures, you've got surgery on your ACL, you've got biopsy, you've also got the DASH diet, which is a treatment. And the procedures label is something that we've gone around and around a lot about, but wellness, the wellness concept, same thing, and they share a lot, as you would imagine, right? Being active, eating well, exists across a lot of wellness concepts. Same thing for aspects. It's described in language appropriate for content developers, and we explain how these things need to work together. And this is great. Our AE, Tarina Bale, built this up. But giving some examples about you pick this concept for this aspect to describe this thing, right? It seems so simple. There are so many moving parts that without something like this, you can easily see how the information that really belongs here might end up in the wrong place, and then we're in a bad place. So that depth of information is in the style guide. It's adapted here for another template. This is our template for personal story. It gives you very clear guidance on how to write this thing when you're at the point of creation. So once you have the base pieces adherent to the rules of substance and structure, you can assemble these things in so many different ways, from very simple combinations, offering up just a single Lego if you need it. We use the Lego metaphor around here daily. Offering up simple things like this little car with 4 wheels and probably like 12 pieces. I have a 5.5-year-old. I know a lot about Legos. And you can get more complex and do more and more complicated things, because you know that just like with Legos, you know that everything you snap to another thing is going to fit. It fits the spec. On down to just insanely complicated things. So when your goal is modular, reusable content, to Abby Covert's point way back at the beginning of this, the decisions we make along the way about structure and language all need to point to cohesion and to functionality, but they need to point the way to clarity and to usefulness of the content between the tags as well, both for the person creating the content so that we can create good content, and for the person, the many people who will eventually benefit from it. Thanks. Good questions? Okay. Did I do that? 8. Whew, boy. Katie McGee is sitting over here. She is my manager here at Healthwise, and yeah, I think the idea started bubbling up probably about little over 3 years ago, and there was some sort of guerrilla discovery work going on because it was a concept that a few people here really believed in and wanted to explore. Turned into a proof of concept, and I would say 2 years ago it became an official, okay, let's do this. And Maria, we finished implementation of our new CCMS, which is really, okay, now we can start making this stuff. When was that, Maria? Yeah, last summer. So it's a lot of moving parts, right? And a lot of work, and we know we've got a ways to go because we have so much stuff. But we still... No, it's both. We have the home team structure, and then we've got project team structure where, and we're a lot more involved in cross-functional collaborative teams now, where you've got a team of a content strategist and a technical expert and an ontologist or an IA, along with a couple of engineers and a product manager to get at solving a problem. And that's a really great step that Healthwise has taken into doing more, especially more of this new sort of discovery work, where we're not on familiar ground. Use a team like that to kind of crack the nut, make it all make sense, and then carry it out to the rest of the team. And we're now in the point in restructuring our content where we're pretty well down the road in bringing the rest of the team into this new system, into the world of change management, into the world of training to tools, training to the data spec, training to this business. Yeah, it's a new world for us, and we're really excited to be in it. All right, you're next.